We have a local story for you right now, but it's a local story with national implications, I believe. You may have been following what's been going on at the Mountaire plant in Selbyville with respect to the decertification of the union that was representing the rank and file there, and that is UFCW Local 27. Now, the person who brought the complaint against the union with respect to decertification is a worker there. His name is Oscar Cruz Sosa. Mr. Sosa has been a very courageous individual in working hard to decertify that union. The only problem is all the, I guess, all the qualities that we think of unions, that the fact that they're organized thugs is certainly coming into play. And we're going to get an update on what's been happening from our good friend Mark Mix. Mark is from the National Right to Work Foundation. Mark, you have been keeping us up to date on this case. Now, obviously, the last time we had you on was just before the transition from the Trump to the Biden administrations. But what we do know is that, we're not sure that Joe is actually running the country. As a matter of fact, let me take a step. Joe is not running the country. Whoever is running the country is very, very friendly with labor unions. And how is this going to impact what's going on now with the Mountaire case in Selbyville and the fact that it appears that Mr. Sosa now has been subject to some threats and is fighting back against those threats, correct?
That's right, Jake, and we have been providing representation to Mr. Sosa through the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, and it's been quite an odyssey, and you're absolutely correct. Interestingly enough, when it comes to the transition between Trump and Biden, this case, we believe, is far enough down the line that the actions of the Biden administration on Inauguration Day probably won't affect it, but that remains to be seen. And just to give a recap here, Jake, 23 minutes into Biden's administration, right when Garth Brooks's echoes of Amazing Grace were returning to the platform where the swearing-in had occurred, an email went out to the General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board saying either resign or be fired by 5 o'clock. The General Counsel, who had 10 months left on his term, this has never happened in the history of the National Labor Relations Board that a General Counsel has been fired, but he got the email. He said, I don't think this is a good idea. This is an independent agency. I'm the top lawyer here, and the only reason why you would want to do this is to put your people in power so they can change the direction. And so he was fired at 5 o'clock. The next day, his acting general counsel stepped in. She got the same email saying resign by 5 o'clock or be fired. She said not a good idea. She was fired by 5 o'clock, and the Joe Biden administration reached out to Chicago and brought in a acting general counsel who has literally turned over just about everything that had happened at the NLRB relating to employee rights, Jake. That's the important thing. Employee rights, overturning that in favor of union power. And this Mountaire case is just another example of that. Basically, the union here filed a complaint against Mountaire requesting all attendance records, daily hours, and work time, and entry and exit point information about Mr. Cruz Sosa. They want to know where he was going back to August of 2019. They want to know when he came in, when he worked, what entry point he entered in, all this information that basically was designed to retaliate against him and to intimidate him into basically, not standing up for his workplace rights. And this is clearly, if an employer did this, their head would spin so fast the union would be certified and they would have unfair labor practice charges if they even had the perception that surveillance was underway. But the union asked for it. The regional director in Baltimore is basically considering it. There's an investigation going on, and the only reason we found out about this is because the union filed a complaint against Mountaire for not turning over those records and that information about the entry points and hours of their workers. So it's an interesting case. As we mentioned before, Jake, the votes have been cast. They were cast last July.
Right.
They've been impounded pending the outcome of the case, and we expect that case to be decided probably before August.
Mark, I am of the opinion, and I talked about it on my monologue this morning, that the Demcoms, that's what I call them, they have managed to flip our Constitution to use our constitutional protections against us. That's what they're doing. They're doing this in every aspect of how they're trying to take this nation over and take them into converting us from a constitutional republic into a socialist republic. They are using our constitutional protections against us, whether it's to pay back political favors to the unions or to gain and to hold on to more power. That's what this looks like to me.
Yeah, indeed. And, when you think about the Bill of Rights were limiting rights. They said the government couldn't interfere with these rights. They weren't necessarily rights that we had because our rights are natural. They come from God. So what the Constitution talked about in the Bill of Rights was like, look, government can't do this. But yet, in this case, the freedom to associate. The freedom to associate presupposes the right not to associate. Yet our labor policy forces workers into these associations they never asked for, never voted for, never wanted. And just Tuesday night, Jake, you're not surprised by this, the United States Congress in the House of Representatives voted to repeal all right-to-work laws across the country. There's 27 of them that are in place, saying that workers could be forced to pay fees or dues to a union in order to get or keep a job.
And what Mark Mix, who's the president of National Right to Work Foundation, is referring to is something called the ProAct. And that was passed on the 9th of March, which was 2 days ago. Protecting the Right to Organize Act. I guess that's the ProAct. And tell us, how does this affect businesses that are really struggling right now to stay afloat, given the fact that government has worked to shut down small business and build up big stores such as Walmart since the pandemic first hit a year ago?
Yeah, actually, Jake, the important thing to distinguish this bill is that it's against workers. It's not necessarily against employers. There's plenty of stuff in there that deals with employers and small business people, increasing fines up to $100,000 for allegations of unfair labor practice charges. But basically what it starts out doing, as I mentioned, repealing all the right-to-work laws, which would force workers to pay fees to a union they never wanted, never voted for, and never asked for.
Right.
Secondly, it would allow union certification by what is known as card check. It basically stacks the deck, and if there's any complaint at all of any impropriety by the employer in a union certification election, then the secret ballot vote doesn't matter. The NLRB can impose a union by simply saying, yeah, we have a card check here, we're going to impose the union on you. It allows for secondary boycotts. This means that basically if you're a bakery and you have to have flour in order to make your bread, if you have a strike with your union at the bakery, the union can now go protest and picket your flour delivery system, and so you can't bake any bread. That's called a secondary boycott. That's in this bill. The bill that would basically say that an employer can't speak to individual employees about what the impact of unionization would be. The bill also includes, get this, that illegal immigrants would have the right to sue their employers and get more relief than a legal worker.
Oh, wow. Isn't that wonderful? And we should say that Plugs Biden, who is obviously not playing with a full deck, says he put out a statement, although the statement, probably didn't come from him. But this is what the regime is saying. The president said more empowerment of workers is necessary as the nation recovers from COVID-19 pandemic, which hit workers hard. He previously promised to be the nation's most pro-union president. And Plug said, and I quote, "The middle class built this country and unions built the middle class. Unions lift up workers, both union and non-union. They are critical to strengthening our economic competitiveness." Doesn't he know that unions are one of the reasons why a lot of jobs went offshore to places like communist China?
Yeah, Jake, that's interesting you mentioned that, the offshoring, because basically over the last 4, 5, 6 years, the onshoring, the manufacturing business that have come back to the United States during the previous 4 years, 69% of that manufacturing base came back to right-to-work states, not forced union,
non-union,
but right-to-work states. Yeah. And that's important. I mean, the Trump policies from an economic standpoint, it seems like this administration is just dead set on anything that he did to help not only workers and Americans put food on their table and help small business people to build and grow businesses and create opportunities for workers. All that's gone aside to the special interests, specifically in this week with big labor bosses getting more power over more workers under the so-called ProAct.
Mark Mix, what can we do to fight back against this? Obviously, the deck is stacked against us for sure, but what can we do? Because it doesn't seem like many of the Republicans or most of the Republicans have a lot of fight in them. What can we do?
Well, we certainly have to pay attention to what's happening. The one thing I would recommend, just import Joe Biden back to Delaware. If you do that for us, that might help. But
well, can we get him a job at can we get him a job at the Mountaire plant in Selbyville? He might be a good chicken plucker. What do you think at this point? Can he pluck chickens, Joe Biden?
Yeah. Yeah, if he's got a union card, he can get in.
Oh, okay,
But
that's
no,
good.
look, we've got to pay attention to what these politicians are doing and pay attention to what's in these bills. I mean, the so-called COVID relief bill bails out all of the failed union multi-employer pension funds with an $89 billion appropriation. That means you and I, Jake, are going to pay for the mismanagement of union pension funds across the nation. There's lots going on here, and we just got to pay attention and hold our politicians accountable. That's what this grand experiment in self-government requires.
Mark, thanks so much for keeping us up to date with respect to what's going on at the Mountaire plant. The Mountaire plant is obviously a very important business to this area, and the fact that their people are standing up to the thugs in this union, I think says a lot for this area and the fact that we're not going to take this lying down. If you push us, we're going to push you back.
Yeah, Jake, and thanks for the opportunity to keep you informed and keep folks informed about this. It's an important case, and to your introduction, it does have national implications. This case in Mountaire is going to make a difference for workers across the entire nation as it relates to some of these regulations that the NLRB has created over the years that stop workers from saying to the union, we don't want you here anymore.
Mark, thanks so much for giving us the update, and we will be in touch shortly. As soon as there is a change or some type of decision from the NLRB with respect to the plant, the Mountaire plant in Selbyville, we look forward to having you back on, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
You're listening to Delmarva Live on 92.7 WGMD.